This right here is the Clever Dripper. It is one of my favorite brewers. It makes a delicious cup of coffee and pretty much anyone can use it. So let's check it out. Hello, my name is Stephen Holm and I'm with Homegrounds. Like I said, today we are checking out the Clever Dripper. The Clever Dripper is a really unique coffee brewer in that it is sort of a mix between a drip and an immersion brewer. Now what makes this a sort of hybrid between those two is a stopping mechanism here at the bottom of the brewer. And how that works is if it's just sitting right here on this handy little stand that it comes with, and you are dumping water and grounds in here, the stopper is preventing the flow of any liquid out the bottom until you set it on a mug or a carafe of sorts, and then you are engaging that mechanism of sorts and coffee will begin flowing. So you can kind of treat this like a pour over and just have it wide open the entire time and you're just continuously pouring, or you can dump everything in at once, kind of let everything become friends for a while, and then set it on your carafe whenever you're ready to begin the drawdown. Now, a quick overview of this brewer. It comes in two sizes, but the larger one is definitely the more popular. They are both plastic and they use standard Melita style filters, so just your number 2 and number 4 filters that you can find at the grocery store, which is great. You don't have to seek out any special filters. Because this brewer is plastic and fairly small, at least compared to like a big drip brewer, it's great for traveling. But another reason it's great for traveling, but also just using at home all the time, is because it's a very forgiving brewer. The reason I say that is because thanks to the stopping mechanism, this brewer is not as reliant on grind size and pouring technique. You don't need a special kettle for this brewer because you're just dumping all of the water in at once. And then as far as grind size go, we'll get into why that doesn't matter as much later, but you can use a coarse grind or a fairly fine grind and get very good results out of this brewer. So we're gonna dive right into brewing with the Clever. We're gonna start with a very standard recipe and then look at a couple different ones that allow you to really experiment with different variables in coffee brewing. All right, so to start off with, like I said, we're gonna be doing a very standard recipe. This is similar to the one developed by Workshop Coffee and used by James Hoffman. And the idea behind this technique is we are gonna be adding water first and then coffee grounds after that. And the benefit to doing that with this brewer is that when you add coffee grounds first and then you start pouring in hot water, those grounds will sort of embed themselves into the filter, especially the finer particles of the coffee grounds, and that will slow down your drawdown. So with a pour over brewer like the Hario V60, those fines in the filter are gonna slow down your brew time overall, thus you kind of have to compensate for that. So to begin, we are going to fold up our filter. As always, pre-rinse your filter to get everything nice and heated up. Whoops. Try not to do that. Empty that out. And then I have ground up 26 grams of coffee on a medium fine setting. Oh, so used to doing that, I almost added the coffee grounds already. Do not add the coffee grounds yet. Add your water. We are using 400 grams of water at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Add your coffee and start your timer. And right away, give that a nice stir. You don't need to stir this too much, but just enough so that all of the coffee grounds are getting saturated. We're gonna let this sit until about 1 minute, 30 seconds. Give it a quick stir and then start drawing it down. Empty out your carafe. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Give it a quick stir, start drawing it down. And as you can see, this drawdown is a lot quicker than one might be with a pour over. And that is a fairly finer grind than I would use for any pour over. Okay, and that drew down in just about 35, 40 seconds. And that is pretty much it for that standard recipe. Go ahead and enjoy. Coffee is really great. It's similar to a pour over in that it has some really nice clarity, but it also has some body in it, similar to a French press, thanks to that immersion brewing. It's a really great cup. But now let's dive into technique number 2, which experiments with some variables thanks to the unique aspects of the clever. Okay, so recipe number 2. This is gonna take advantage of one of the great things about the clever dripper we talked about earlier, and that is the ability to use a much finer grind size. So we're gonna start off the same way. Make sure to always preheat your brewer, but this time I have grounds that were ground for espresso. These are straight from my espresso grinder, and thanks to being able to pour water first and ground second, they shouldn't clog up the brewer. I say shouldn't because in some of my tests, if I gave too much agitation, too much stirring of the grounds, they did kind of settle and really started to clog up the brewer. But if you're really careful and it takes a little bit of practice, you are able to use grounds that were really, really fine for espresso. Now I've only ground up 20 grams this time, so we are going to do 300 grams of water. Once again, this is 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Go and add the water right in there. 20 grams, start your timer. Stir just enough to get those grounds down there and incorporated. And then also, because these grounds are so much finer, we're going to steep this for much shorter. Actually, about 45 seconds. This will have a longer drawing down time than the other way to brew it, which is another reason that we stop steeping much sooner. And it looks like this isn't going to clog up. We're just about there. So quite a longer drawdown time. The first recipe was about 25 to 30 seconds, and now this is about a minute longer than that. And the taste of this coffee is going to be much different than the first one. It's going to be a lot stronger, taste more concentrated, and this is actually a great example of a cup of coffee that you can make that you want to bypass or just add more water to the strength that you're looking for. We'll take a sip of this just on its own, and then I'll probably add some water in order to bring it up to a strength that I enjoy drinking. Pretty delicious. It is definitely stronger, but it's got a lot more depth, a lot more body to it than that first brew did. Gonna add just about half of the amount of coffee that was already in there. So 2 parts coffee to 1 part water here. And that's delicious. It tastes very similar in flavor to the first cup, but with a little more depth. The mouthfeel is more similar to something that uses a metal filter versus a paper. And it's just a really interesting way to brew coffee out of a brewer using a paper filter. Usually you don't get a super heavy body like this. Okay, so on to our third recipe, which is kind of doing the opposite of what we just did. So our third recipe is going to once again utilize the advantage of this dripper in that you can adjust the grind size without that affecting the overall brew time as much. But to the other end of the spectrum, we're going to use coffee that is ground very, very coarse, similar to that of, say, a French press or that you would use for cold brew. And since we're using a much coarser grind here, there are a couple of things that we have to do in order to compensate for that grind size. The first is that we are going to do a much longer brew time. We are going to do 3 minutes overall here. But then the second thing that we're going to do is use a cooler water temperature. But we are starting out the same way as usual. Water first in here. I have once again only ground out 20 grams of coffee, but you can up that to the 26 to 400 gram recipe that we used to start with. We are pouring in water, 300 grams at 180 degrees Fahrenheit this time. And that didn't make any sense. The whole point of this is that it is not supposed to be on here yet. But I just wanted to preheat it. Just once again, get it nice and ready. Okay, let's try that again. We are pouring in 300 grams of water at 180 degrees Fahrenheit. 20 grams, start our timer, and dump those in. I'm probably gonna stir a couple times, maybe once at the 1 minute mark and once at the 2 minute mark, just to keep everything even. But we're just gonna sit and wait for a little bit. 1 minute, hit a quick stir. Right, 2 minutes in, And we just have 1 minute left. All right, coming up on 3 minutes, and drawdown. You can see how much quicker this drawdown is happening compared to the espresso one in the last one. And it's very different from the second recipe, which was another reason this brewer is great, because you can use it so many different ways. This was all using the exact same coffee, and all 3 cups tasted completely different, but none of them bad. This cup is very citrusy and bright, not as much body as the second recipe. It really brings out a lot of the fruitier flavors versus the second recipe brought out a lot of the nuttier, sort of darker flavors. And I really enjoy that. Like I talked about at the beginning, how this is great for traveling. If you're stuck somewhere, someone already has pre-ground coffee, you can adjust your timing based on how fine or coarse that grind setting is. That's why it's so fantastic. That pretty much covers everything with the Clever Dripper. Hope this video was helpful and gave you some ideas with how to use one. If you don't have one already, highly recommend it. There will be links for everything in the description down below. And also let me know if you have any questions about anything we covered today. And until next time, happy brewing. Just realized that this mug was facing out, even though usually I try to not show what this says, but I guess I'll just read it. Just put it all out there. It says, "Dear Dad, thanks for all the belly rubs and for picking up my poop. Love, your favorite." It's a mug from my dog. You can see it even says Leonardo and Steven on it. The dog's name is Leo. He's made some appearances in some of these videos, but I do not know where he is right now. He's like, he's in this house. I just don't know where in the house he is. He's not right here. I didn't lose him, okay?